shloka because for the Mangala, and all the shlokas we will recite when we go to the temple. So please carry that sheet with the shlokas. So in the temple we'll recite them all. One means Asmadrupa.
Asmadrupasamavishtaः Svatmanatva-nivarane Shiva karotu nijaya Namah Shaktya Asmadrupasamavishtaः Svatmanatva-nivarane Shiva karotu nijaya Namah Shaktya
Although we are now going to leave out many sutras, but still I don't want you to lose the thread. So that, as it says, ma vichede, it should not be interrupted, so that even if we leave out some sutras, we still get the connection with the whole. And I say it maybe wrongly that Vasugupta may not have divided the sutras into 3 sections, but actually it does appear that this was his intention, because every section starts with a certain level, a certain definition of Atma. And this constant discussion we have with the Buddhists about what is Atma. Now here, Atma is defined at different levels, because we have the different levels from Shambhava to Shakta to Anava. So the self is not always the same. It depends on the level of consciousness in which it is experienced. And it is very clear that the first section starts with Chaitanyam Atma, so that's the highest level, that universal consciousness. Second starts with the identification of the Atma with Chitta, mantra, with mantra. And so the third starts with, Chitta. Chitta is in the third section. So Chitta we have already had, is the limited mind, and at the level of Anu, the limited individual. So when speaking of Atma, one has always to be careful to which level of consciousness it refers. So we have the second section is very short, and we have left out the last sutra, but it does not matter so much. But the third in the third awakening, the Atma is defined or is identified with Chitta. That means the lowest level of self-consciousness, which is individual, which is determined by thought and by multiplicity and so on. Now, as it belongs to the Anavopaya, the individual way, here you find all kinds of practices, maybe not so much in the sutras themselves as in what Kshemaraja adds to the sutras. And to these, those who feel a bit lost in that supreme level of Shambhavopaya, because nothing to hold on, there is no yoga, there is no thought, there's nothing to hold on. And you don't have any method, you don't have any... But definitely at the individual level, there is yoga. But even that yoga is defined in a different way from the usual, the Patanjali or Hatha Yoga. And this is something we are at least going to touch before we come to one of also my favorite subjects, and which may be interesting to some of you who are in the field of the arts. So the first sutra defines the self as that limited individual being, Atma Chittam. You find it? Page 126. 126 in Jaidev Singh. And here the commentary establishes the connection and the difference between the earlier definitions of Atma and this limited self. So the commentary is not long and it is quite easy. This limited self, Vishaya Vasana Churitatvat, it is constantly colored with a desire for sense objects. And it is always engaged in the activity of their ascertainment. Appropriation to self and thought constructs. And these activities are carried out by buddhi, ahamkara, and manas. So the three so-called internal organs which constitute the limited self. It is these that constitute chitta. And it is this chitta which is the individual Atma or Anu. It is called Atma because the word, and here it is a different definition of Atman, fitting to that level of the self. Atman because from the root at, which means to move constantly, atati iti atma, that which moves constantly is Atma. So this is the limited self which is constantly in what we had this kshoba before, constantly moving. It is not stable, it is not established in its own true nature. Atati iti atma. Yeah. Owing to primal ignorance, I'm just seeing what is. Owing to primal ignorance of its real nature, which is pure foundational consciousness, it moves on to various forms of existence by clinging to the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. That is why it is called Atma or Anu. But really speaking, natu chit eka rupasya asya atanam asti. Really speaking, there is no wandering of Atma, which is purely consciousness. Ata eva chaitanyam Atma, as in the first sutra. And so Atma has been defined in the first sutra. Now, however, the definition is being given mainly from the standpoint of its appearance in limitation. So that is Atma Chittam. Now, from here, we can go past this Jnanambandha. Jnanambandha, the same sutra was there in the first section, so at every level there's another level of bondage by knowledge. But we proceed to, in Jaidev Singh, page 138, now, as I said, at this level of anavopaya, the individual means, there is yoga. Now, he describes the different aspects, different limbs of yoga, of Ashtanga yoga, in completely different terms. The introduction to this fifth sutra reads, thus, after describing the dhyana aspect, we are not going into that, of anavopaya, the formulation of the sutras now describe pranayama, dharana, pratyahara, and samadhi, which serve as means for the acquisition and maintenance of dhyana. And then this sutra, nari, samhara, bhuta jaya, bhuta kaivalya, bhuta pritaktvani. So here we find those terms which are well known in Hatha Yoga. Nadis are not, chakra is not mentioned, but dissolution of the flow of prana, nadi samhara, in the nerve channels into the sushumna, control over the elements, bhuta jaya. Now, bhuta jaya, this is a particular yoga. I mentioned the yoga of the Malini Vijayotara Tantra, and this is a very interesting practice. It is actually, the entire practice is called Tattva Jaya, the conquest of the elements, not only of the bhutas, but of all the tattvas, so that you ascend through from the earth to Shiva, through all the tattvas, and there is a method to it. But we cannot go because we don't have the text here also. That is very complex and very beautiful. Tattva Jaya, the conquest of the elements. Because, as I said before, nothing is to be left out in this yoga. Everything has to be gone through. Nothing, none of the elements of the universe and of the human being has to be left out. And that is either Bhuta Jaya or Tattva Jaya. Bhuta Kaivalya, withdrawal of the mind from the elements and separation from the elements, Bhuta Pritaktva. Now, without going into the details of what is all implied in the sutra, I want to mainly come to the quotation from the Swachanda Tantra, and then from the Nitra Tantra, Swachanda Tantra mainly. That sutra should be complemented by yoginam bhavaniyani iti shesha. These should be contemplated upon by the yogis. Now, nowadays, the nerve channels means the channels which carry prana, apana, etc., the different aspects of prana. Samhara means bringing about that dissolution in the middle nadi, in the central channel, which is of the form of udana, fire, by the device of pranayama. And this is now one of the central practices of the entire yoga, by stopping the outer and inner flow in order to bring them together in the middle or sushumna nadi. Now, who is not familiar with the 5 pranas? The 5 pranas. Maybe it's not, you are not familiar. See, prana, the central breath, it has 5 functions. So like breathing in, breathing out, and then the breath goes upwards, and then it is distributed in the body. So these are different aspects of breath. So the 3 main ones which are mentioned here are prana apana, that is breathing out, breathing in, and udana, that is the uprising breath. And udana is always compared, the 3 breaths are compared to the sun, moon, and fire. Sun, because it gives, is prana. See, it's a little different from the definition in Hatha Yoga. Prana, because prana is flowing out, so the sun gives its rays outwards. Apana is coming in, so the moon takes the light in. And udana is fire, because it rises up. Fire is always rising up. And the central practice is to make these 2 breaths enter into the central, which is the sushumna nadi. So it comes again and again in different contexts, and so this is the turning point in if you practice pranayama or if you practice any kind of vipassana or whatever it may be, attention on the breath. The turning point is when the 2 breaths enter the central, and it's rising as udana in the sushumna. So this you will find in all this, in the Swachandra Tantra, Netra Tantra, all the tantras describing any practice with breath. But stopping, it cannot be an artificial stopping. Again, it is not Hatha Yoga, but it has to happen again spontaneously. As your practice deepens, as your meditation deepens, your consciousness deepens, it will happen. It cannot be artificially brought about like some of the pranayama practices of Hatha Yoga. But then some other practices of pranayama are described, and I don't want to go into the details because these are 4 practices I mentioned in the Sutra: Nadi Samhara, Bhuta Jaya, Bhuta Kaivalya, and Bhuta Pritaktva. So it's not possible in this short time to go into the details. You may read on your own. But in the next commentary to the next sutra, we have a very clear, I told you already, the Netra Tantra is one of the text is very easy to understand, not so difficult like some tantras, but at a very high level of spirituality. So here, Kshemaraja takes the support of Netra Tantra, which is very helpful for us. So, introduction to the Sutra 6. Page 142. Thus, the various supernormal powers accrue to the yogi by means of purification of the body, purification of the elements, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. I think the 8 limbs of yoga are well known, and I need not. All such powers are due to a veil drawn by ignorance and not to the highest knowledge of reality. Again and again we come to that warning against limited powers, siddhis. Here again, because these yogic practices, they do produce, as we read in Patanjali, they do produce certain powers. And Patanjali describes it very beautifully and very clearly. If you apply samyama on a particular organ or something, and then the result will be this, the result will be that. So that is very clear. But here again, it is not a question of stopping at those siddhis, but to aim at the supreme reality. Now the sutra refers to that kind of illusion, moha varanat siddhi. That power, supernormal power, is due to a veil drawn by ignorance. Moha varanat. So if you look at certain kinds of yogis who are roaming around and who are displaying lots of siddhis and so on, one has to be very careful not to take them, to place them at a higher level. These siddhis are precisely a sign of a lower level. And also the Jivan Muktas and the Mahayogis, definitely they have those powers, but they try to hide them. We know this very well from, Ramana Maharshi or Swami Lakshmanjo. They had all these powers, but they were never making a display of them. It just happened by the way. So these powers were manifesting because you cannot stop them also. But they never showed, to see if any healing occurred or something, they were never wanted to be propagated that such a person has been healed. And so that is the sign of of the Mahayogi, that they will not display or make any show of these powers. So those siddhis, therefore, they are rather a sign of moha, of delusion. But now Jemaraja comes to this beautiful quotation of the Netra Tantra. The introduction, that which deludes is moha. In other words, it is maya. There occurs supernormal power in the form of control and enjoyment of the various things brought about by dharana, etc., in succession, which have been mentioned owing to the veil drawn by maya. This power does not denote the manifestation of the highest reality. This is the point. Natu paratattva prakasha. They do not reveal the highest reality. Now, those who have Swamiji's book, Shiva Sutras, there is a big mistake in the on page 146, 147, and 148 in Swamiji's book. This is the mistake not of Swamiji but of the editors. They have ascribed these quotations to Lakshmi Kaulanava Tantra, but it's only the first quotation on the top of page 146, and all the other quotations are from Netra Tantra. Continuing till the end. This is all Netra Tantra in continuity. Now, we just concentrate on this definition of the yoga, yogangas by the Netra Tantra, which starts where it says, on page 143, Vikalita mohasyatu, and then Madhyamam pranam ashritya pranapana patantaram alambya jnana shaktim cha tatstam chaiva asanam labhet. Now, what has been said in the previous commentary by the Swachanda Tantra, same comes here, but here every yoganga is redefined in terms of this spirituality. What is asana? Unusual definition. Madhyamam pranam ashritya, pranapana patantaram. One should resort to the middle prana, that is udana, as I said, the rising prana in Sushumna, in between the passages of prana and apana, that is exhalation and inhalation, and resorting to jnana shakti, to the power of knowledge. And having established himself there, he should take his asana there. So asana is not the sitting posture or any other posture, but taking one's asana means a starting point. From where do you start? From which starting point do you proceed with your practice? And that starting point is the central breath. So you would expect this to be pranayama. It is not pranayama. The starting point is the central breath from which, and alambya jnana shakti, and that central breath which is based on the power of knowledge, on the jnana shakti. Now we have this icha shakti in the first, icha shakti, Kuma Kumari, but the next after icha is jnana. So jnana shakti is associated with that asana as the rising breath, entering into the middle central breath. Now, what is pranayama? So all those who have studied yoga, they will be listening carefully because it's very different from Patanjali. Pranadis stula bhavam tu tyaktva sukshmam atantaram sukshmatitam tu paramam spandanam lapyate yata pranayama sa nirdishto yasmat natchavate puna. This is beautiful. What is pranayama? Inasmuch as the highest pulsation of consciousness is obtained beyond the subtle pranayama after abandoning the gross pranayama. Now, these are all reference to practices in Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga has stula pranayama. And also the subtle one that is carried on inside the Sushumna. Therefore, this is the pranayama prescribed as the best form from which there is no fall anymore. This is very beautiful. If you are established in that kind of pranayama, from going from the gross, means the physical, to the subtle pranayama actually is related to Kundalini, to the supreme. Page 143 in the Sanskrit and 144 in the translation. Actually, the Netra Tantra describes in three chapters what it calls Stula Dhyana, Sukshma Dhyana, and Paradhyana. So Dhyana is a kind of overall concept for yoga, and the Stula is obviously what we are used to with Hatha Yoga. Sukshma is more connected with Kundalini, and Para is that which is, as I said, connected with Jnana Shakti, with the power of knowledge. But here, this pranayama, the supreme pranayama, from which one does not fall. Because any other practice, any of these yoga practices, you may do it for some time, and sometimes you may be very well established, well practiced, and then again you fall down and at the lower, or you may forget it, or you may lose that practice. But this is one which you cannot lose once you are established in this. And Prana is described as paramam spandanam. And here we have the whole spanda, concept of spanda. Prana is the supreme vibration. Supreme in the sense it is so subtle that you cannot even attain it by the subtle pranayama. But it is beyond the subtle. Paramam spandanam. That's a very subtle, extremely subtle vibration. Paramam spandanam. Now, what is pratyahara? So I should tell maybe Daisy, see, the first asana is just a sitting posture. Pranayama is practice with the breath. And the third is pratyahara, means withdrawing the senses from the objects in the Yoga Sutra. And here, Tyaktva tam paramam dhamma pravishet tat svachetasa pratyahara iti prokto bhavabhasha nikrintana. Pratyahara, leaving aside even subtle supernormal sound, etc., which are modes of sensation caused by the gunas of Prakriti and are experienced by the mind, one should enter the highest state with full eye consciousness. This is said to be real pratyahara. This cuts away the noose of transmigratory existence. So again, it is a spiritual process and not a yogic process of the either gross or subtle practice. Now, pratyahara in the sense of the Yoga Sutras or of Hatha Yoga has been severely criticized by the Tantric yogis because it implies a negative understanding of the senses and the objects of the sense. Because here, the senses and the objects of sense, they are used in a very different way for practice. So they are not negated. They are not suppressed. Because pratyahara always implies a kind of suppression of the sense. You have to just, the example of the tortoise, withdrawing its limbs and cutting out all the impressions of the sense objects. But in Tantric Yoga, we know that the senses are used in a very different way, and they are not, neither the senses nor the objects are suppressed. Then what is dhyana? Ti gunan sam atikramya nirdhyayam paramam vibhum tyatva dhyayam svasamvedyam dhyanam tatcha vidur buddha. Sometimes I prefer to translate myself because Jaidev Singh adds something. The wise know this to be meditation, dhyana, which by meditating on the non-meditable, the unmeditable nirdhyaya, that which cannot be meditated upon. Who is the Supreme Lord? Param Vibhum, the Supreme All-Pervasive Lord, who cannot be made an object of meditation, nirdhyaya. Because dhyana always presupposes there is a subject who is meditating, there is an object, and there is a method by which. But this dhyana is directed to an object which is nirdhyaya, which cannot be meditated upon, which can never be made an object. And that is the Supreme, all-pervasive Lord. Tigunad samatikramya. And this can only happen by transcending, by going beyond the qualities of the mind or of the intellect. Ti is also buddhi. by going beyond the gunas, the qualities of the intellect or of the mind. Then only you can meditate on that which is not meditable, which is not an object of meditation. So it makes you again jump into another realm where you have nothing to hold on. You don't have any object of this meditation. Now, what is Dharana? So, Dhyana, Dharana, Samadhi. What is Dharana? Dharana, Paramatmatvam, Dharyate, Yena Sarvada, Dharana sa Vinirdishta, Bhavabhasha Nivarini. It is etymologically explained, Dharyate. And the highest self is always held in consciousness by the aspirant, that is defined as the dharana, which sets at naught the fetter of transmigratory existence. Dharyate, yena sarvada. Dharana comes from the root dhri, to hold. So if you hold something in the mind, because you may have a temporary meditation or something, but if you're holding it, you make it permanent, and then it becomes that, what he says, the overcoming the world of becoming, bhava bhasha, the bondage of the world. And this is dharana. And what is held, it is Paramatma, Paramatmatvam, the state of the Supreme Self. And then what is Samadhi? We're again coming back to the same topic of compassion. What is Samadhi? Normally we understand that Samadhi, like in the yoga, you isolate yourself completely from the world and from all contact with living beings and so on. But here's just the opposite. What is Samadhi? Svaparasteshu bhuteshu jagati jagat yasmin samanati shivoham advitiyoham samadhi saparasmata. In this world, whether in oneself or in other creatures, if one maintains the idea of sameness, that is, if one experiences in everything the same secondless Shiva as I am this, that is known as Samadhi. Svaparastesu bhuteshu, in all the beings, whether in oneself or in the others. And this is a kind of etymological explanation of samadhi. Samanati, having the same mind, the same spirit, the same of equality. You know, the concept of samatha is very much also in Buddhism. Samatha, that equality, that equilibrium, that balance, that harmony. I have translated sometimes also as harmony. Samanati, an equal mind or equal T. How do you translate? T. Idea of sameness, he says. The idea of sameness in relation to all beings, whether oneself or others. That is samadhi. So it's not isolating yourself from the other beings, but rather being in harmony, being in complete harmony with all beings. That is real samadhi. So here also it is a question of yoga, but that yoga is interpreted in such a different way from the Patanjali or Hatha Yoga. Now we leave out some sutras and we come to Sutra 9. Yes? T. Samanati, yes. Well, you can translate it, you see, Thi and Buddhi are more or less the same, but it is, you can also say a mind not in the sense of manas, but a mind of equality, an equal consciousness. T can also be translated as consciousness, and maintaining the same consciousness in relation to all beings, samanati, in harmony with all beings. So translation is always a bit, because these terms are so much fixed, how to translate manas, buddhi, and dhi, and all this. Now we come to another subject. And don't think that I'm now giving an introduction to Shaivism, but still one has to say that there are two basic aspects of Shiva, whether mythologically, spiritually, iconographically, artistically, and or whatever. One is Shiva as the Mahayogi, that is we have here, who is the ideal model for the yogi, who is in perpetual samadhi. And the other aspect, that is the static aspect, and then the other aspect is the dynamic aspect of Shiva as the dancer, Nataraja, Natesha, and so on. Now this is a very old concept, as we know also from the temples and the iconography and so on. Now, this dynamic aspect, since we are here in the Spanda school, it is an aspect of the vibration of consciousness. And from the subtle vibration of consciousness to its expression in dance and in drama, etc. So these are very ancient concepts, and they have been beautifully and extensively described in the Natya Shastra. Natya Shastra is also related to Kashmir, that the basic texts on dramaturgy, which of course has that fantastic commentary by Abhinavagupta, the Abhinava Bharati, where he goes into all the subtleties of the aesthetic experience and whatever, whether technical, because he was very well versed in the technicalities also of theater, of musicology, of stage production, everything, or the subtle aspects of the aesthetic experience, what is called the rasa experience, with all its psychological variations. And now, of course, Abhinavagupta is much posterior to the Shiva Sutras, but we see even at this stage, the Shiva Sutras, means Vasugupta, or as inspired by Shiva, of course, was very conscious of the Natya Shastra, because these concepts were already there, and these concepts are very precise to which aspect of this drama and dance he refers. So there are several other texts, of course, in in the Tantras also, where Shiva is described as both a dancer and an actor. And Nartaka, of course, means both. And the whole world is described as a drama, Jagannatya. Jagannatya, the whole world is a drama. And here the Shiva Sutras give us the basic, a very early expression of these three aspects of theater, of a drama, in relation to the self and in relation to Shiva, because here Atma is that self which is already identified with Shiva. So these sutras are, and that's why they are again and again quoted by the later authors, because they give the fundamental idea of Shiva or the self as a dancer and as an actor. And because the question is also, see, if the ideal of this Mahayogi we have been talking about in the first section and so on is Jivan Mukti, means being realized in this body, in this life, then how will he, like in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, what is the Sthita Prajna, how is he going to behave? What is his, okay, he has attained a state of Sthita Prajna, but what is he going to do once he is established in that state of Jivan Mukti? Then whatever activity he has is a kind of a play, and that is what the Spandakarika say. And that play, but has a very precise correlation with the classical drama, drama and dance. And in Indian tradition, the two are never separated, because the actor has to dance also. So this sutra, it relates to the highest stage of consciousness. It is not starting from the individual consciousness. Now he has already gone up to that highest stage, which we had in the earlier definition of Atma. Idrisha Shayam Savata Swasarupa Vimarsha Avishta. Such a one, such a yogi, is always immersed in the consciousness of his essential nature. Introduction to the sutra. Then Nartaka Atma. The self, means the self of such a yogi, is an actor or a dancer. But what is this kind of action, acting and dancing? And that is this. Now the commentary, you have to listen very carefully. It's very, very beautiful. Nityati, he dances. What does it mean? Anta viguhita svasvarupa avashtamba moolam tattat jagara adinana bhumika prapancham svaparispanda lilaya eva svapitau pagatayati iti nartaka atma. He dances. That is, page 152 in the Sanskrit and 53 in translation. He dances, that is, he exhibits in himself by his playful movements varied roles of his waking, etc., which are based on his essential nature that is concealed within. Anta viguhita svasvarupa avashtamba moolam. Now this, his real nature, see, one of the points of this metaphor is that the self-identity of the actor is, he is himself and yet he represents something else or somebody else. So that being himself is, he is established in his own essential nature. And in comparison to the yogi, he remains in his essential nature, And yet he performs all kinds of things in the world. And there is one shloka, which unfortunately I don't have the Tantra Loka here, and I have an article on Leela where I have interpreted that. Now this dancer or actor, on one level it is Shiva himself, another level it is the actor, and another level it is the yogi. And that yogi, there is this verse at the end of the first chapter of Tantra Loka of Abhinavagupta, where he describes a yogi who is intoxicated with his own bliss, and he acts like a madman. And this can be understood as there are certain yogis also in Tibet who they have reached a very high stage of consciousness, but in order to conceal that, they act like mad. And this is a tradition. It is not only it is in Buddhism, it's in Hinduism, even in Christianity. You have those who are mad, the mad of Christ. They also they act like mad, but this madness conceals their high level of spiritual achievement. And we have examples for that, of course. I mean, some of the Pashupata yogis and some of those extreme ascetic sects, they purposely act like mad, so that they should not become, they shouldn't have that ego, that now I'm a great yogi and people are coming to fall at my feet and so on. But they become like mad. So this is why this antaviguhita, that his true nature is hidden within. And in that shloka of Abhinavagupta, it is who can recognize these mad yogis. See, must be at the same level of consciousness that then you can recognize. Otherwise, you think, oh, these are just crazy. Antaviguhita. But what are his actions? I mean, now, if taking Atma as the soul, his actions are states what we had: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and all these intermediary, all these 9 states. These are all actions of the self, because he is hidden in his own nature. But still, he eats and he sleeps and he goes to the market or does anything like other people also. So people cannot recognize his hidden nature. And we have many examples also of some of those great spiritual beings, who people think, oh, they're just ordinary, because they behave like others, if you cannot recognize this hidden nature. Now we had, you remember in the first awakening, Vismayo Yoga Bhumika. Now Bhumika, the stages, it has another meaning, and that is also role. So the actor has different roles. So Bhumika is such an important, interesting term, because it means the yogic stages, and it means, I have worked a lot on temple architecture, even the levels in the temple, you have these sections. Today we are going to the temple, I can show you the bhumikas in the temple. And there are also the roles which an actor assumes. All these meanings are connected, of course. And what does he do? Svaparispanda lilaya. But he is acting these roles by the subtle vibration, the play of the subtle vibration of his consciousness. Svaparispanda lilaya. It is a play. But that play is not a gross one. It is the subtle vibration, svaparispanda, of his own self. And he demonstrates, or he performs this on Svapitau, on the screen. We have compared the consciousness, pure consciousness, with a blank screen. On the screen of his own consciousness, Svapitau. And then he quotes the Naishvasya Tantra, entitled, that chapter which is entitled Goddess and Goddess Dancer. Tam ekam shena antaratma nartaka kosharakshita. In one aspect, you are the inner self, a dancer. In another aspect, you are the preserver of your essential nature as the highest self. So this refers precisely to these two levels of the consciousness of the actor. He is himself. At the same time, he is somebody else. He enacts or he represents somebody else. So these are the two aspects of Shiva. And then Pattanarayana, in his Stavachintamani, by the way, Pattanarayana, he was of the same time as Utpaladeva, 9th century, and he must have been very much aware of the different art forms, because he speaks of drama, he speaks of dance, and he praises Shiva as a dancer and so on. And that's a bit different from what Utpaladeva does. So here he is also very conscious of what is happening in a drama, in this one verse from the Stavachintamani. O Shiva, you have produced a three-world drama, which has in its interior Maya as the source of all existence. Kahan? Maya kahan hai? You have presented the introductory portion of the drama. Where is the creative artist other than yourself who can bring about its conclusion? Now these are technical terms. Bija, Garbha. See, these are all technical terms of drama. Bijas and the opening section of the drama, it's a kind of seed, which gives an indication, a hint to what is going to happen. So you have sown that seed, so that bija has always these different levels of meaning. You have established that seed of that Trailokya Nataka, here this Trailokya Nataka, the drama of the three worlds. And Prastava is that section of the drama, also in the beginning section. And then, if you have performed that opening section of the drama, then who else will perform its conclusion? So the same stage director, he has to bring the drama to its end also, to its conclusion. So he's challenging Shiva. Now, you have done this opening section of the drama, now please bring it also to the conclusion. It's very... Ko anya kavi kshama. The kavi is the poet, but also the artist in general. Kavi is not only poet. What other artist is there except you? And that's the whole concept, that Shiva is not only a dancer, not only Shiva is the great artist in all spheres. Capable. Who else would be capable to bring it to its conclusion? And it's beautiful from Pratibhijna. It is probably from a lost commentary as it says, which contains the secret of all the agamas, but it is by Utpaladeva. Samsara natya pravartayita supte jagati jagaruk eka eva parameshvara. When the whole world is asleep, only the highest Lord, the producer of the world drama, is awake. It's very beautiful. We don't have the aage piche kuch nahi hai. Only this one sentence. The whole world is asleep, and only the producer of that world drama is awake. It's very beautiful. Now, there are two more elements, but I'm afraid that the time is over. Can we do one more sutra? There are two more elements of drama which come in the next two sutras. And I think something I will have to leave for tomorrow morning. We'll try to extend a little bit tomorrow, which we couldn't do today. After all, a drama needs a stage. So what is the stage? The next sutra now speaks about the stage on which this actor in the world drama plants his feet and plays his part. Bhumika, grahana, pada, bandha, sthana, ranga. These are all technical terms of traditional theatre. Rango Antaratma. Now the question is, what is this Antaratma? The inner soul constitutes the stage. Now he will say what is this inner Antaratma. It's a whole description of these three sutras. Refers to the inner drama. It is all the inner drama, not the external. But the external drama is a metaphor for the inner drama. And that is why there are so many correspondences. Everything is corresponding. The elements of the external drama, elements of the world drama, and the inner drama. Rango Antaratma. So what is Ranga? What is the stage? The place where the self takes delight with the intention of exhibiting the world drama is the Ranga or the stage. That is the place where the self adopts the various roles. Again, Bhumika. Bhumika Grahana Sthanam. The place for adopting the various roles. Jagannatya Krida Pradarshana. So, the play of that world theatre, the world drama. And Ranga, it is derived from Rajati, that means takes delight or in joyful delight. Tatat Bhumika and assumes the different roles. Antaratma, what is Antaratma? What is that inner self? Sankocha avabhasa satatva shunya pradhana prana pradhano va puryashtaka rupa deha pekshaya antaro jiva. It is the inner self, inner soul, which is of the subtle Puryashtaka. Yeah. I'm not so happy with his translation. Of the subtle form that has a contracted manifestation with the main constituent being either the void or prana. That's not so clear. So it is not the supreme Atma, it is the Jiva, it is the individual soul. Tatrahi ayam kritapada svakarana parispanda kramena jakannatya abhasayate. Having planted his feet on that stage of the inner soul, this actor displays the world drama by means of the active movements of his inner sense. Now, Karana, Karana means both. Karana and the poses, dance poses are called Karana. It means the whole body, it's not only the hands. And Karana also means the senses. So this double meaning is again there. He's playing always with the double meaning of the theatrical or the dance elements and the spiritual elements. So what he performs in his dance or in his acting is by means of these poses. And what the soul performs is by means of the senses. See, but the outgoing senses. So this double meaning is there. So difficult to translate these things unless you give a lot of footnotes. Svakarana, his own movements. And technically these karanas, they are, of course, described in the Natya Shastra, and they are depicted in the temple of Chidambaram and some other temples in South India, with the inscription of the text from the Natya Shastra and the sculpture. So we have studied that in Chidambaram, all these karanas. So there are different movements which are described in and these karanas in the relation to the soul are the senses. So different movements, different actions, yeah. And then from the Swachanda, entering into the Puryashtaka. Puryashtaka, let me say, is the psychic body which consists of the 5 tanmatras and the manasputi ahamkara, the subtle body. It is mostly described. The subtle body, manasputi ahamkara, and the 5 sense tanmatras. Entering into the subtle body and moving about in all forms of existence, he is to be known as Antaratma, the inner self, bound by the residual traces of good and evil deeds. Because without the senses, without sense experiences, there is no movement, there is no action, there is no manifestation, because it's all a question of manifesting something, of displaying something. So we will stop here, but just to quote the next sutra that is relating to the spectators. So you have the actor, the dancer, you have the stage, then you have the spectators. And who are the spectators? They are your own sense organs. Prekshakani indriyani. Your own sense organs are the spectators of that inner drama, which is at the same time the cosmic drama, Jagannatya, the world drama. So there are all these 3 levels, at least 3 levels of all these terms. The inner drama, the world cosmic drama, and the stage drama, which we know from the Natya Shastra. So that one has to take into account all these levels of meaning. And the whole thing means that even the yogi, the Jivan Mukta, when he acts in the world, he performs a play. He because he still has his senses, he still has his body, so he performs, he And that performance is not any bound by any attachment. It is all a free play. That is why Leela is always a metaphor for this total freedom, the spontaneity, which the yogi has only when he has reached that level of consciousness.